Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the awe-inspiring and honestly pretty shocking reality of how Sparta became the absolute most feared military society in human history. We're going to peel back the Hollywood myths and really unpack the exact methods, the mindsets, and the extreme sacrifices that forged an unstoppable empire. I mean, just picture a nation so relentlessly ruthless that newborns were routinely inspected for physical flaws. A place where 7-year-olds were systematically stripped from their families and transformed into literal killing machines. A culture where the mere concept of surrender was considered infinitely worse than death itself. So, how exactly did they build this terrifying reputation? And more importantly, what was the true cost of that invincibility? Let's start with Section 1. Birth of a warrior nation. To really get Sparta, you have to look at them around the 8th century BC. While their famous neighbors over in Athens were busy prioritizing philosophy, trade, and building this rich culture, Sparta chose a radically, almost unimaginably different path. They willingly sacrificed nearly all personal freedom. Instead, they opted for total state control and absolute military excellence to build the perfect, flawless war machine. But why go to such extremes? Well, the dark motivation behind this intense militarism wasn't just about fending off rival Greek cities. The truth is, they were essentially sitting on a powder keg. They were vastly outnumbered from within by their own conquered enslaved population, the Helots. So constant military readiness wasn't just some point of pride for the Spartans, it was an absolute daily necessity for survival to prevent a massive rebellion.
Moving on to Section 2, the world's toughest childhood.
When we say childhood in Sparta, we are talking about a military obsession that kicked off on day 1. State elders literally inspected baby boys, and if a child was deemed too weak to thrive, they were simply abandoned. From their very first breath, Spartans learned that survival wasn't a guarantee. And if a boy did survive, the clock was ticking down to his 7th birthday, when he'd be pulled right into the state machinery until graduating as a full-fledged soldier at 20. That brutal middle step? That was known as the agoge. Entering the agoge meant waving goodbye to your mother and your home to live in stark military barracks. This is where boys learned combat, survival, and weapon mastery. Just to give you an idea of the grit involved, they slept on beds made of riverbank weeds that they had to pull up by hand. They endured freezing winters with barely any clothing. Pain wasn't an exception, it was a daily companion. And here's the really wild part. Food was intentionally kept scarce to make them perpetually hungry and desperate. In fact, boys were actively encouraged to steal just to survive. But if they were caught, they were brutally punished. The catch is, the punishment wasn't for the theft itself. Oh no, it was for being careless and sloppy enough to get caught. It was a brutal way of ensuring a Spartan grew up to be as clever and stealthy as he was strong. Which brings us to Section 3, this secret Spartan ritual. Because if you thought the physical and mental torture of the agoge was rough, that was basically just a warm-up for the krypteia. Select young Spartans, armed with absolutely nothing but a knife, were sent out into the countryside on a shadowy, terrifying mission. Their job? To secretly hunt down and execute any helots who looked strong or potentially rebellious. This wasn't just random violence, though. It served a very calculated, terrifying dual purpose. Sure, it was advanced stealth and survival training for the young warriors, but equally, it was a systemic tool for terrorizing that massive slave population into absolute submission. It's a really sharp contrast, right? You've got this glowing, legendary heroism of Sparta on one hand, and their terrifying reliance on state-sponsored terror on the other.
Let's look at Section 4, the unstoppable war machine.
So, by the age of 20, if you survived all of that, you emerged as a full-time soldier equipped with a simple but incredibly deadly arsenal. Unlike other Greeks who kind of just fought when they needed to, for the Spartans, war wasn't a profession, it was their entire identity. Take their crimson cloak, for example. That wasn't some fashion statement. It was specifically chosen to hide blood stains. It made their injuries virtually invisible to enemies, projecting this incredibly intimidating aura of invulnerability. Now, you can't talk about Sparta without talking about their legendary battle tactic, the phalanx. Imagine hundreds of warriors packed tightly, shoulder to shoulder. In this formation, a warrior's shield didn't just protect himself. It was positioned to cover the man standing directly beside him. Together, they created a moving, practically impenetrable wall of bronze and spears. And this completely shatters that pop culture myth we all see of the rogue, lone wolf warrior hacking his way through enemies. Spartan invincibility didn't rely on individual heroism at all. Actually, it was the exact opposite. Their unmatched power came from absolute teamwork, flawless discipline, and the complete, unwavering trust they placed in the guy standing next to them.
This absolute, unbreakable unity was cemented in history in 480 BC. We're talking, of course, about King Leonidas and the legendary 300 elite Spartans, standing alongside their Greek allies against the massive, invading Persian Empire at the narrow pass of Thermopylae. For 3 relentless, bloody days, those Spartans held that pass, turning every single Persian assault into an absolute disaster. It was only when a traitor revealed a secret mountain path that they were finally surrounded. Knowing the battle was totally lost, Leonidas and his men flat out refused to retreat. They fought to the last man in what is still remembered as one of humanity's greatest acts of courage.
But that do-or-die attitude, that didn't just magically appear on the battlefield. It was fueled at home. Spartan women lived completely differently than women in other Greek cities. They were educated, they exercised, they spoke their minds, and they owned land. And they demanded absolute victory from their sons. There's that famous saying from a Spartan mother telling her son to return victorious with his shield, or be carried home dead upon it. Cowardice was literally unacceptable.
Finally, we reach Section 5, Downfall and Lasting Legacy.
Because, let's face it, no empire stays on top forever. A shrinking citizen population, endless wars that completely drained their resources, and rival states that eventually just adapted to their tactics, it all finally caught up with them. After centuries of absolute dominance, their aura of invincibility was permanently shattered by a shocking defeat at the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC. From there, the mighty military machine gradually just faded into history.
Their buildings crumbled, sure, and their physical armies vanished, but think about the principles that survived. Discipline over comfort, courage over fear, duty over selfishness, and persistence over excuses. These raw ideals of intense determination and self-mastery totally outlived the empire itself. They continue to deeply inspire leaders, soldiers, and athletes all over the world today.
In the end, they prove that a society's ultimate defense isn't built with vast wealth or giant stone monuments. It's forged entirely from the unrelenting discipline of its people. They mastered themselves, and in doing so, they became legends. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. In our modern world that so often prioritizes comfort above almost everything else, what is the true cost of absolute strength? And is it a price any society should ever be willing to pay again?